What is up guys, it's your boy Swallam here, back with another classic WoW video. So today we're doing something a little bit different and we're making a class tier list for classic WoW hardcore, where I will be ranking all of the classes based on my opinion, going all the way from the easiest class to play to get to level 60, and the most difficult class to get to level 60. So as you can see on the screen right now, we have put the Hunter in the S tier and the Warrior in the D tier, and this means that the Hunter is going to be the easiest and the Warrior is going to be the most difficult. I will also be ranking all the other classes between these two, and we're doing this live on stream. You will find a link to both my Kick and my Twitch in the comments down below or the video description, and I'm doing duo streams both on Kick and on Twitch. We're also doing a 24-hour stream when we get to 150 followers on Kick, so feel free to make an account and follow me over there. With that being said, I'm going to be playing this clip from this stream, and you can let me know in the comments down below if your class tier list looks different or similar. Let's make a tier list about the classes in hardcore super quick. So what we're going to do here, can I actually change the name of this one? I can, right? Okay. Actually, I'm just going to keep it this way. Okay, so what we're doing right now is I'm going to be making a tier list of the classes in hardcore based on how easy they are to get to level 60 or how difficult they are. So basically being S tier means it's very easy and D tier means it's very difficult. So we're basically going to throw two classes on there right now, and then you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So we're ranging the classes from Hunter to Warrior based on how easy or how difficult they are to level up in hardcore. So based on me throwing those two classes up there, let's talk about that super quickly. Let's talk about the Hunter and why it's so easy. By the way, we're doing this live on stream. If you want to chime in anything in the chat, please feel free to do so. I haven't played every single class, I'm just going based on my opinion here, so if you played any of the classes that I'm talking about, feel free to, well, let me know your opinions in the chat as well. So Hunter is super easy. I'm putting this in S tier. There's basically only one class that has been played at a naked level, like it's literally a naked Hunter with 1 health, and I don't know how far he got, but I saw him at level 40 at one point. So level 40 plus, Hunter 1 life, like literally a 1 life character, and naked as well, which means that if he ever took damage from literally anything, he would have to delete the character because it's a hardcore character, and all the way up to level 40 he never took any damage. So Hunter's definitely super easy, even like without a pet they're super easy. It's not as easy being any other class, and Hunters are the only class that I've seen actually manage to do that at least. What is the definition of easy? I would say pet management and the learning curve is higher than a warrior. I mean, yes, but Hunters have a very low skill. I would say they have a very low skill floor and a very high skill ceiling. Very low skill floor, very high skill ceiling. Like, even if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to be, look at it this way. Let's say you're a complete new player to Classic WoW and you want to try hardcore. Which class do you think you would make it furthest on? A Hunter or a Warrior? Based on not knowing anything about the game. Or let's say you're an average player, would you make it further as a Hunter or a Warrior? I think simply having the opportunity of having that pet tank for you makes it so much easier. You can use your pet to keep your mob at a distance, while you can basically kill them from a distance. You never have to take damage unless you're trolling. You also have access to frost traps, freezing traps, concussive shot, all of which can permanently slow down your enemies, and if they ever make it to melee range, you can then wing clip. So no matter if you're in melee range, ranged, wherever you are, you always have a slow available, and you have a pet that can tank for you. I feel like all of this combined definitely makes it quite easy, if you ask me, but obviously that's my opinion though. So let's move on to the Warrior as well, talk about why the Warrior is kinda difficult, and I guess this one kinda speaks for itself, right? It's a Warrior, you have the obvious downsides of being a melee character, you also have the downsides of basically never having any type of self-heal ability. What I will say though is that Warriors are the most difficult class, but if you know what you're doing, They're not super difficult either. They have they basically start out being very weak, but if you're playing a level 30 plus warrior, you will have a lot of damage output, and you can basically kill mobs faster than pretty much anyone else. And as long as you're doing your kiting correctly, you can kite one mob towards the next mob and be super efficient. Well, by doing it, they also have a way to kite using thrown abilities to get their whirlwind axe or whirlwind weapon super quickly as well. So warriors are difficult, but definitely doable, and once again, super high skill ceiling, if you ask me. Next up though, let's talk about some more classes on this tier list. Let me go back to my tier list super quickly. Okay, let's talk about the class that I'm playing then, Warlock. So I'm not going to put this in the same tier as the Hunter, I'm going to put it at the tier below the Hunter, just because I think there is such a gap between Warlocks and Hunters. First of all, Warlocks, how do I put it? You feel a lot more squishy. The Hunters have a lot of options that Warlocks simply don't have. For example, Frost Trap, you can permanently freeze an enemy in place. As a Warlock, you have the same ability, but you have Fear. So instead of freezing them in place, you fear them, in which case they run around like in a circle, they run a direction, they run all over the place, and in this case, it's a double-edged sword, right? Fear, it will help you out, but it can also make things worse. If you fear your mob into a different pack of mobs, it's gonna cause absolute chaos. Being a hunter, you can control exactly where you want to see your enemies, but as a warlock, you pretty much have to fear them around, and you always have the actual you have the possibility of that one mob running into 2 or 3 other mobs, and they all come back to you. And if you're not aware of your surroundings and aware of that happening, suddenly you have 5 mobs on you, and you're dead, right? That being said, at level 40, you get Howl of Terror, which also can fear up to 5 mobs at a time, and you also get Death Coil at some point, so the higher level you get, the more abilities you have. But the Hunter definitely has more stuff in terms of CC, and slow, once again, freeze traps, frost traps, wing clips, concussive shots. As a Warlock, you only really have Fear to help you out. You can also spec into Affliction to get Curse of Exhaustion, but even then, Curse of Exhaustion, even when spec'd into it and gone into an improved Curse of Exhaustion, it's a minus 30% movement speed. So it kind of feels like you're lacking that survivability and escapability options, but you also have your Demon Sacrifice. So Warlocks are definitely good, but personally, I just feel like Hunters are a tiny bit better. Now let's get into the difficult classes to talk about: Mage, Druids, Paladins, Priests, Rogues, and Shamans. There's one class here that I don't know anything about or where to put, and that is a Shaman, so we're gonna save that one for last. I've never played a Shaman on hardcore. I've played pretty much all the other classes at some point in Classic WoW, so I have some degree of knowledge on most classes here. Let me just turn down the music a little bit again, so here we go. Let's talk about the Paladin. So, Paladins I want to put pretty high on this tier list, to be honest. Paladins have a lot of stuff. I'm gonna put them in the B tier. Feel free to agree or disagree with me, let the actual arguments commence here, but Paladins for me, based on this tier list, you have Hunter, Warlock, Paladin, and then Warrior. I kinda don't want to put anything into the tiers of Hunters and Warriors. I'm going to be putting some classes next to each other now, but Paladins for me will be B tier, and let me talk about why. Paladins, they feel very bad to play, and they feel very slow. They are very slow, but slow and steady wins the race, right? You have access to some damaging abilities, not the best ones, but you have quite a few of them. You also have both ranged and melee abilities. You have a lot of self-healing options. You also have Blessing of Protection. You also have Shield, Divine Shield, Bubble, you can call it, whatever. Lay on Hands, another one right there. Huge life-saving abilities available to you. You can also use your Hammer of Justice to stun the enemy and run away, or you can use it on casters to interrupt their casts. You also have access to tanking, DPSing, or healing, all of which can be done in dungeons or solo, basically. You have a huge toolkit available to you that you can use. And put it this way, if you use a bubble to get out of a situation, and you don't manage to get out, you can still use something like Blessing of Protection to also get out. You have a lot of ways to actually get out of dangerous scenarios. If you're slowed down but your health is not an issue, you can use Blessing of Freedom to go out of to get out of combat. But if you're low on health, you can either use Lay on Hands or you can bubble and still get out of combat. It is worth mentioning that on the current hardcore on Classic Era, you cannot use Bubble Hearth. So even though that is something you can theoretically use, it is not something you can use on hardcore on Classic Era. Either way, Bubble is super helpful and will save your life over and over and over again. The next class, this one could be quite controversial, it's the Druid. I'm gonna put the Druid right next to the Paladin, so there we go, in the B tier. Feel free to agree or disagree with me on that one once again, and let me talk about why I'm personally putting it into B tier. Now, it's a hybrid class, right? You can tank, you can DPS, you can do pretty much anything. The good thing about Druids is that you can both be a healer, you can be a tank, you can be a melee DPS, and you can be a ranged TPS. You can do pretty much whatever you want. And you're quite good at everything too. Like for example, in the level 10 to level 14 level range, you can put Moonfire on 4 enemies at a time. Well, let's say 3 or 4 enemies at a time, and then go into bear form, and you can comfortably just melt everything down while you're just questing or doing whatever. It's not probably something you want to do, but it's something you can do, and it will definitely help you out if you're playing on a packed server where there's a bunch of people competing for quest mobs. Having access to Moonfire is an instant tagging ability and also deals damage over time, and doing that, then going into bear form increases your armor and also makes you take less damage, so you're more tanky, while letting Moonfire deal its damage over time, and you can also just melee attack them in bear form at the same time. It's super good, and you can use your shapeshifting to get out of movement impairing effect, such as roots, slows, pretty much anything, so having access to shapeshifting is absolutely massive, and you can use your cat form and dash ability to run out of dangerous scenarios. You can use travel form to run out of dangerous scenarios, and you also have access to self-healing. Self-healing is absolutely massive. One more thing worth noting here is entangling roots. You can use that as well to your advantage, both when it comes to kiting, but also just CCing one mob while taking care of the other one. This can be a huge lifesaver. The one reason why I'm putting it in the B tier is that a lot of your spells are in one element, so it's nature spells, right? Basically everything you have, or mostly everything you have, is in the nature category, including roots, and if a mob is immune to nature spells, well, you're kinda useless on those roots and nature damage. But you can still go cat form or bear form, you just have to be a little bit more careful, but for me, Druids are B tier. Next up, the Mage. Mages also B tier, right here, right next to everything else. I'm kind of debating on if I want to put Mages above Druids or Paladins, but I'm going to keep them in B tier, like at the bottom of the B tier so far, and there's one main reason why. Mages can AoE farm, they can use Frostbolt and Blizzard to kite things pretty much forever, but you're a glass cannon. Like if the melee mobs get too close to you, well, you're pretty much gonna die, right? It's a class where if you know exactly what you're doing, like I could put the Mage class all the way up here if you know exactly what you're doing. Like if you're Tommy Salami or Joe Good, for example, Mage would be fantastic. If you're a normal player, Mage would probably be more at the B tier, maybe like towards here. I would say it's still here though, for a regular Mage player. Like first of all, you're playing hardcore, you don't want to do AoE leveling unless you know exactly what you're doing. And if you know exactly what you're doing, then Warrior as well would go all the way up here. I see a couple of you saying that Mage is S tier, and I mean, I would agree with it being there, based on what I just said, where normal mages that are not AoE farming would be here, and mages that know exactly what they're doing, they are in S tier. I'm gonna compromise and put it in A tier, because for me, once again, hardcore, you definitely should not be doing AoE farming. It's super dangerous. Your main ability is slows from level 1. It is. But if you're playing on a fresh server or the regular classic era servers, mobs are spawning super quickly due to the dynamic respawns, and if you're pulling one mob with one slow and suddenly another mob is on top of you, you can Frost Nova, then blink away, then Blizzard, and what if you blink away into one more mob afterwards? Now you don't basically have nothing else you can do except for resetting the pack. It can be quite dangerous, you're super squishy, you don't have any self-healing. Once again, I would put it higher, but the fact that you don't have self-healing, you don't have a pet tank for you, I'm just not comfortable justifying this being S tier. I will say, it's absolutely amazing if you know exactly what you're doing. It's one of those classes that are good no matter what, but if you know exactly what you're doing, it's super good. As any class, you are fucked. Kinda depends. A priest, for example, you can use Psychic Scream to get out. As a hunter, you can use Freezing Trap to get out. As a paladin, you can bubble and then run out. As a warlock, I can use my demon hunter and use an AoE taunt and then get out. Next up then, rogues. Rogues is quite controversial because some people want it to be like down with the warrior or C tier. I'm going to put rogues all the way up here, like right next to the mage. All the way up in an A tier. Now some people might say it's S tiers. I'm gonna say it's A tier, right next to warlock and mage. I personally feel like warlocks are easier than rogues, just based on the fact that as a warlock, you have access to a Voidwalker, which is a personal tank. As a rogue, you have the obvious downside of being a melee, like a melee class, but you have a lot of defensive and escapability options. You have access to sprint, to run away, you have access to evasion, to basically increase your dodge chance, and that way you can just face tank anything you want, or you can use it as a defensive as well to run away. You have access to vanish if things go south, which is absolutely incredible, and while you're questing, you can use stealth to go around mobs that other people actually have to kill, right? You can just walk past them, you can sap them, and you also have access to a bunch of stun abilities. I believe you have Kidney Shot, you also have Cheap Shot, and you have Gouge. Gouge is absolutely insane, especially as a defensive ability. You can, for example, Gouge, then sprint away if things go south before you have Blind or you have Vanish. And you also have Blind, that's another thing. You can CC, if you pull two mobs, you can blind one, take care of the other one, and then you can basically use First Aid to get your health back up, and it really helps you out. Rogues have access to a huge toolkit. The one thing that keeps them from being S tier for me is the lack of self-healing options outside of having First Aid. You do lack self-healing in combat, which can be dangerous sometimes, and you also, once again, you don't have a pet tank, right? Locks being easier than Rogue, that's not possible. Oh yeah, it is. I've seen a lot of Rogues die. Rogue is the definition of the perfect hardcore class. They have everything except for self-healing, and except for a pet, and also except for a bubble. They have everything except for what they don't have, and they're a melee class, which is why I'm personally putting them here, because once again, referring to what I just said, if you are the perfect player, yes, these classes like both Mage and Rogue would be S tier, but I'm basing this on the average person. Like, I'm not basing this on the best of the best player of all time, right? If you know exactly what you're doing, a lot of these classes are great. Paladins can be one of the fastest classes to get to level 20 in the game, or at least level 10 or something. Paladins are insane for speed leveling, but if for people who are not like known speed levelers, Paladins are slow to level for regular players. It's all about how you look at things. So, Shaman. Shamans I want to put in C tier. I actually don't have too much to say about the Shaman, but I do have a couple of notes though that I can talk about, but I've never played a Shaman, so take this one with a grain of salt. As a Shaman, you have access to self-healing, which can be definitely quite useful. You can also use a shield, which really helps you out in the lower levels, and you have access to both melee abilities, ranged abilities. Rockbiter weapon really helps you out super early. You have access to Ghost Wolf to increase your movement speed, which is absolutely incredible. And you also have access to Earthbinding Totem, you have Sentry Totem, you have Tremor Totem, you have so many good totems. Even at low levels you get access to Stone Claw Totem super quickly, and this can basically be used as a target dummy. So even if you don't have engineering, shamans basically have their own target dummy without needing to have engineering, which is incredible. And then if you have engineering, you have 2 target dummies instead of 1. So next up then, the last class, the priest. Personally, I would want to put priest into B tier, but I think most people would want them to be C, but low B or high C would be the priest for me, like there or there. I'm not too sure. It's like either or. I think I would put it like right there, maybe. There's one thing that makes me really happy about priests. I've played a priest recently, and that is having access to Psychic Scream, which is once again, just like the Warlock Sphere, it's a double-edged sword, and mostly, personally, I use it in defensive scenarios to get out of combat. It's like, if things go south and you already plan to run away, this can be a huge lifesaver, because instead of the mobs just hitting you and hitting you and hitting you, while you're trying to leash the mob, you can just press one button, and they all run away and scatter. Now that being said, they can run into more mobs and make it even more difficult for you, but in most scenarios, you can just use this ability to run away safely and get out of combat. As a priest, you also have access to a lot of self-healing options. You have access to Power Word Barrier, or Shield basically, to shield yourself against damage. You can heal yourself over time, you can spec into Shadow as well, or Discipline, and you can also get access to a wand spec, increasing your wand damage output by 25%, so you can deal even more damage without having to use mana whatsoever, which is actually quite incredible, because that way you can save all your mana to heal yourself in case, once again, things go south. Having that access to both healing and damage output, I personally value quite highly, but once again, you're a cloth class, so you take a lot more damage from melee abilities, and you don't have any pet to tank for you. You also lack the ability to stun or slow mobs, so you have quite a few downsides, which is why I was personally debating putting it down to C, but I think I would put it at B. Based on having access to that extra wand damage, it's actually quite huge. So I think that's going to be my final tier list for hardcore. Probably way different than many other people's tier list, but that's based on my experience and, well, my short experience on most of the classes here except for the Shaman, and also based on what I've been seeing from other people. But hey, let me know how wrong I am though on this tier list.